Hey guys, welcome to the channel. I want to talk about fear of making wrong decisions or bad decisions because this is something that came up in the webinar last night for fear of sadness and depression. And often, one of the reasons that people fear sadness and depression is because they think they will make a wrong or bad decision. So it can go hand in hand that way. But I want to look at some of the beliefs behind decision making that really fuel our fear and seeing how we can break that down and what steps we can take forward. But before we go on, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and let us know what you think of our content. So, two of the main fears that are behind fear of making the wrong decision or fear of making a bad decision are I shouldn't make mistakes and I should not have any regrets. Those are like the two main things that fuel that analysis of what's the right decision to make. And of course, there are many other fears that are attached to it, such as fear of guilt, fear of rejection, fear of depression, fear of embarrassment, fear of missing out, because you might feel like one decision might result in you missing out on something else that's amazing, right? So, or fear of not making the most out of your life because you want to make the decision that really propels your life forward in a way, and fear of ruining your happiness, right? So obviously there are other attached fears to it, and then you can like really start going into like the nitty gritties of what each and every fear is for each and every person. But largely, like fear, as far as decision making goes, two main things that most commonly stick out are fear of making a mistake and fear of having some regrets. And that comes from a lack of self acceptance as well, because you don't want to be a person who ever makes mistakes. You want to be someone who has a clean slate. It's this view that I must always have a clean record, or I must have a spotless reputation. I must have a spotless streak of behaviors in my past, right? So wanting to have everything smooth and neat in terms of your life, in terms of your past, and everything needs to be in a specific order. And of course, there is a big element of control, in fact, over here as well, where you're trying to control yourself, your life, and your happiness to a detrimental extent. You're controlling it. So, looking at those two beliefs, like, would you have to start working on accepting the fact that you are someone who is going to make mistakes? That's not even uh, a might or a perhaps. That's not an if question. You are going to make mistakes because you're human, and as long as you're human, you are susceptible to making mistakes. So, and you are prone to making mistakes, and that's the only way to live, in fact, as well. So accepting that mistakes are going to happen, because if we just reject that reality, then for me that's kind of living in denial, and that's kind of living in the illusion of control, that I can control my actions to the point where I'm not going to make any mistakes. So accepting that mistakes are going to happen, and also accepting that they're going to come with some shitty feelings at times, right? Some not so great emotions, not so great thoughts about yourself or another person or about your life, right? So those are all part of the package of making mistakes. And also accepting that life is not free of regrets. Now, the lack of acceptance around making mistakes and having regrets is also coming from a very black and white perspective, that making a mistake inherently is like a horrible thing, and having regret is inherently a horrible thing, right? Whereas neither of these things are inherently bad things at all. It's genuinely our perspective of what regret and mistakes mean is what drives our fear cycle and our anxiety cycle, right? Because if you really look at it, and this is what people say, like for instance, where if there's a harm OCD sufferer, they would come in and say, but in what world is killing someone not like a mistake, because that is a mistake. But hold on, we also don't have to jump the gun to like the most catastrophic kind of event immediately, right? If we even scale back, you're probably not making any room for making mistakes or having regrets in your daily small habits either. And that's often something that, like, I don't think I've ever had a phone call or a conversation where I've brought someone's attention to their daily life, where they say that no, I'm okay with making mistakes in general life. Not entirely, because like I would say, in almost all conversations, you see that people are also trying to control their decision making, or trying to control not making a mistake at work, um, in their relationships, when they're out on the road, when they are out in public, when they are crossing the street, like even then interacting with like the public at large, interacting with strangers. They want to make sure that everything is done in a way where they don't reflect back and think, oh, this is something I regret now, or this is some guilt that I have, right? So, and of course, when you are going to try to live by such a rigid and strict framework, OCD is naturally going to find something that it will hold against you, and it will hold over your head as like a really bad thing. And so it can even be something as small as, like, you might be someone who's suffering from harm OCD and fear of killing your family, but for 24 hours or for 48 hours, your main preoccupation might be that I didn't hold the door at the grocery store or at the mall for that old lady. What must she be thinking of me? Maybe I need to track her down, and maybe I need to apologize, right? So that might be your main preoccupation for 24 or 48 hours, and it really cripples you. It's a very small thing, but it really cripples you. But you notice, you start seeing that it's not just about this big bad fear that you have, that your OCD is latching to. It's also latching onto these small little things in your daily life that really consume you, and you start to analyze, you start to reassure yourself, you start to talk to people about it, you start to beat yourself up in a really bad way and bring yourself down for that. And that's essentially down to the belief that I should not have made a mistake, or I should not have had regrets. Even at times, the other attached fear that I must not upset other people. So looking at those inherent black and white views of yourself and your actions, and what regret and mistakes mean, is really key over here. The other thing that this results in often is indecision for a lot of people. I was the king of indecision. I didn't make decisions based on the fact that I thought that the regret and guilt and shame will be too much for me to handle, and that I can't handle it, that it would be like the worst thing ever. But you also have to realize that indecision and lack of a decision is also a decision. So when you sit back and you say that, oh, I'm not going to make a decision about this, or I'm not going to take this step forward because it might be the wrong one, then that's also a decision, and that also comes with consequences. So not taking an action and not making a decision has its pros and cons as well. So essentially, every single thing that you do comes with certain outcomes. So there is nothing really that is not a decision. Most things are, and I'm saying decision a lot now. So, but yeah, I used to do that. Even something like I said, it comes down to small habits as well. No matter what theme you have, because even sitting at a restaurant, I would just be like crippled with the fact that I have so many choices to order from. Like, what do I order? How do I know what to order? Um, am I sure that I am going to enjoy this? Am I sure that I'm not going to regret this mocha frap that I am wanting to order? Will it be bad? Will it be good? I don't want to walk out of this with like a thorn in my side, or like with a dent in my mood, that you know that I ruined my day, or I ruined my night, right? And again, coming from this point of view that um, like any mistake is going to ruin my entire day, or it's going to just like put such a bad spot in my day that it's going to be so hard to overcome, and I can't handle that, right? So I would do that in like tiny little, there you go. I would do that in tiny little habits on a daily basis. But obviously, it would play out the most in my relationship OCD and my contamination OCD. That's where it showed up the most. Because even with exposures with contamination OCD, it was that fear of making. If I do an exposure, what if it turns out to be the biggest mistake of my life, and then I will never be able to overcome that mistake ever, 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 right? And I will always think that I just shouldn't have done that. And also, again, this fear that I will be plagued with the notion that I just should not have done that. I felt like at times for me it was less about fear of people's rejection. At times it was also fear of my own rejection from my own self, and I was afraid of my own judgment because I thought I would judge myself so harshly, and I didn't think I could handle that. It was almost like I was another person that I feared. It's a strange thing to sometimes explain, but yeah. um and what really goes behind in trying to make the right decision or the correct decision or the good decision is trying to wait for certainty, motivation, bravery, or calmness to make that decision or to take action, right? Because we're waiting for the feeling first and then we want to take the step. Again, king of demotivation over here, where I put off every single thing because there was some excuse or the other to not take a step forward, which was I don't feel motivated enough, I don't feel well rested enough, I don't feel ready enough, I don't feel prepared enough, I don't feel confident enough, brave enough, enthusiastic enough, passionate enough. I just don't want. And it was almost this like apathetic state of being that I was in. I just kind of lost interest, and it was not just lost interest. It was at times active disinterest in things that just put me in that spot of just sitting back and being like, nah, I'm not going to do anything, right? So, and again, because I was waiting for the feeling first, and then I was then and I thought that the feeling had to be there first for me to take action or make a decision, and that was the wrong equation I was going by. Because especially with demotivation, which I would say was probably like my Achilles heel on the OCD recovery journey, I really had to come to terms with the fact that I had to do things regardless of how I feel. And no matter how I feel, whether it's demotivation or some other like negative emotional force that I feel like is stopping me, I had to do things regardless of that. And in fact, this was the biggest learning curve for me, is that motivation was something that was created through taking action. So it wasn't like the feeling came first and then the action came. It was actually quite the opposite, because it was the action that came first and then the feeling came with it. So if I even break down like three or four of these emotions or these feelings that you're looking for, certainty, right? You're looking for certainty to be able to take that step. But it's actually you taking risks and making mistakes that leads to a more certain place in life. It's not about you having certainty first and then taking the steps. People who have a bigger handle on certainty, even though there's no 100% certainty, of course, but people who feel a bit more certain and confident about their decisions are people who have actively taken chances, made mistakes, and learned from those mistakes, because they weren't certain from the get go. No human being is. If that were true, then I think a lot of the human population would be quite happy in life. Motivation, like I said, you're not going to be motivated just sitting in bed trying to manifest motivation. You'll have to take that step on your own. You'll have to actually start doing things for your brain to see that, okay, there's actually things happening. I'm getting maybe some results, and maybe I'm learning as I'm going along, and that is what creates that motivational cycle for yourself. Bravery, again, bravery, you're not going to instill bravery in you. Another example I give is, and I think I may have spoken about this in another video, is skydiving. Like, you can't sit in bed and instill or install bravery in yourself to be like, now it's going to be great and I'm going to skydive. No, you're probably going to feel like you're that everything is going to fall apart when you're about to jump from the plane, right? It's going to still feel extremely scary. But once you do it, is only when and you land on your feet is when you're able to harness or create that bravery and confidence for yourself. And so the second time that you're going to go for skydiving, it's going to feel much better and less scarier. It's because you have that one experience to draw from then, right? So again, taking a chance, or and let's say the first time you jump out of that plane, something is doesn't go quite right, or your jump wasn't that great. I don't know the ins and outs of skydiving. I want to do it one day, but like whatever the so-called mistake would be, then the next time you'd be like, okay, I'm going to try it a different way this time, or I'm going to try and do that jump better, or whatever it is, I'm going to do that better. And so then you learn from that, and that's how you eventually put in the steps to create that experience for yourself that is the best possible experience for you, right? So yeah, you create bravery through that. Calmness, right? Calmness also comes as a result of having a vast, like, breadth of experiences under your belt, where then making a decision about something becomes easier, and making a decision about something comes with calmness as well, because you're not panicking, and it comes with a sense of, again, confidence as well, because you think that anything that comes your way, you can handle that. So looking at all of these, like, inherently, like regret, guilt, shame, sadness, all of these aren't inherently bad things. We thinking that they're inherently bad things are the problem. And if, of course, someone will say that, no, but like, how will I know that I won't be sad for the rest of my life, or that I will regret this for the rest of my life? I can't take that risk. Well, think about it then. You're not We're not even talking about forever. You're not even willing to make 1% room for any of those negative feelings. Ordering the wrong thing from the menu, right? In that moment, it feels so significant and important that we're not willing to take any chances. So we want to make sure we ask other people, what are you ordering? Have you had this? Do you think this is good? Then you ask the waiter, what's in it? Like, is it good? Is it going to be fine? What are the flavors? What are the ingredients? Like, all of that, you're trying to make sure that you just don't regret that decision. And so you put so much stock in it, you put so much mental energy and time in it, and that in itself shows the level of control that you're trying to have in not even wanting to make space just this much for anything bad in your life. So forget killing people, forget other big bad fears that you may have, forget having cancer, forget contaminating like everything, forget your the fear of your divorce, or the fear of breaking up, or losing your children. Ordering something wrong on the menu, just this tiny thing, but you're not even willing to do that much. And that in itself shows us how much that fear of risk and making a mistake has been like jacked up in our mind, that we're not willing to budge even a little bit. So and again, regret, guilt, shame, all these are actually, they all provide a very vital function to our life, because if you look, like, from a philosophical angle, if you look at life, like, if everything was just happy, then it would eventually become boring, and we would start taking things for granted. The reason that sadness exists in human life is because we need something to contrast happiness with, otherwise we won't enjoy happiness as much as we do. The reason we enjoy it is because we experience sadness. So the human brain knows what the two sides are, and therefore we cherish the happiness more because sadness exists. And the same goes for regret, guilt, and shame as well, where if we didn't have any of those, no human being would ever change themselves. You over here wanting to change your life, you wanting to recover from OCD, is a result of you having regret and guilt. You want to do something to, I mean, of course, it consumes you. I'm not saying it in this chronic format, it doesn't feel positive at all. And it's not actually, because you're doing it to a detrimental extent. But, like, in general, if we look at a human level, when you feel bad about something, it's that is the vehicle of motivation that you use to then change yourself as a person and change your behaviors, and break patterns that you've been doing for a very long time, right? If we didn't have that, we would continue making mistakes. We would continue doing things that upset people. We would continue doing things that are a hindrance and a barrier to our progress as human beings. So all of those are actually, they provide a vital function, but us seeing them as inherently terrible things is what then leads to this entire chain reaction of, like, I can't make the wrong decision. I can't make a mistake. I can't make a bad decision. So I have to control, 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 control. So think about some of those things. Think about how you can start applying those to small little habits in daily life as a starting point, and then obviously you can work up to trying to break down and seeing acceptance in context of your specific theme as well. Again, it takes time, but you can start with like smaller steps in life and pave the way for yourself to make it easier to break down your bigger fears. And hope this was helpful, and I'll see you soon with another video. Bye.